Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight we're going to talk about courage, and as I always like to say, I can't take any credit for the content. It's all from these three references. Existential conflicts was actually dictated by Joanna DeAngelis that Peter mentioned. This book, Existential Conflicts, reminds me of books I had to read in graduate school. It's a lot of heavy stuff, and you have to read the pages more than once, and even then, maybe you have to read again, right? It's deep. Doesn't make it easy, right? But she always offers a solution at the end, so it always finishes not lighthearted, but less heavy and inspirational. So as we talk about ways to develop courage, that's coming from her. The Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 7, Pride and Humility. We'll talk about some of the content from that, because the opposite, or the obstruction or the interference to courage oftentimes is our own humility, or the lack thereof, or our pride and our ego. So we'll dive into that a little bit. And then the last few weeks, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, we've been tying in our talks as best as we can to a book called Our Road to Damascus, which was written by a friend of ours, Dan Assisi. He actually gave a couple lectures here not too long ago. And in this book, Chapter 7, it talks about the courageous question. And we'll start there tonight, actually. So let's see if I can make this work. I can. All right, so in The Road to Damascus, thank you, Russ, appreciate it. In The Road to Damascus, for those of you that haven't read it, and if you missed Dan's talk, it takes Saul, right, who we better know as Paul, right? Saul, who was a hunter of Christians, right, a hater of Christians, chasing them, persecuting them, murdering them in some cases, right? Along this journey, right, to Damascus, has sudden blindness. He has a vision of Christ talking to him. And that whole book is about that transformation. And more importantly, more to the point, how all of us go through transformations throughout our life. And all of us, just like in Chapter 7 of this book, we have to ask ourselves a courageous question from time to time, right? And Paul's or Saul's question that he had to ask, right? What shall I do, right? He's blind. He's on this road in the middle of nowhere. People that supported him previously are not going to support him, because now he's talking about Christ being awesome, right? He had to ask a simple question, yet courageous, right? And that marks a key moment in his life, a huge moment in the history of the world in a lot of ways, right? Because Paul went on to be prolific and quite instrumental in spreading the gospel. Although he never met Christ in the flesh, right? He was a follower of his way and a disciple in the sense of preaching and sharing the gospel to the world. So us, we may never be as memorable perhaps as Paul, right? We may not change the world in the way that he did, but in our own way, we will have our own transformation, and we will have to ask ourselves, what shall I do? So in this chapter, he stresses, right, exactly what I've been telling you, right? We are going to have key moments in which we have a choice. We can keep doing the same thing, or we have to do something different. Oftentimes, we're not really sure of what that is. We just know something needs to change, and we have to learn how to do it because we don't know. And we ask that question is, what shall I do ourselves many times throughout life. And when we do this, it results in a choice, right? We can either stay put in the confusion and the uncertainty of change or what to do next, knowing that we need to change, or we can return to the familiar, what we know. I've done that several times in my life. It's a lot easier sometimes to stay in what I know, even if it's not good, than sometimes to face the fear or the fear of the unknown. And he describes that, right? Dan describes that as this, right? Moving forward can be nebulous, is I think the word that he used, right? It can be unclear. You can't always see the road ahead. You can't always see what's going to happen. It's easy to talk yourselves out of going. It's easy to talk yourself out of not changing because we don't know exactly what to do. Even though we're in a situation that we know needs to change or should change, oftentimes we'll elect to stay exactly where we are and do nothing because it's easier. We'll put off change, we'll postpone change. I've got 2 daughters that they're 14 now, and at least a year and a half, if not maybe longer, one of them has told me, I want to be an actor, right? She's in the drama club, she goes to theater, right? The other sister, her twin, followed her at some point. So now for at least a year, they both want to be actors. They won't take a class, right? They won't study, right? So finally, today, I said, this is it. I'm just going to register. So I'll keep you posted on that. But I hope they make the courageous choice, right? They ask their host the question, what shall I do? And they go. Because until we try, the point is not my daughters, but the point is until we take that step, until we ask that question, until we put ourselves out there, we're not going to change. We're just going to keep dreaming, wishing, wanting, regretting, right? So we have to change. We don't have to change, but we should, right? We should try. Otherwise, our growth slows, and that just perpetuates that negativity perhaps that we're experiencing, or that lack of satisfaction. Is that making sense, or did I confuse it? It's making sense? All right, good. Whew, I did it, Peter. All right, so Dan gives examples from our lives, right? Unfulfilled relationships, right? Stay due to fear, right? Unfulfilling jobs. How many of us stay in jobs or careers that may not be satisfying, but they're safe, right? Feeds the family, it pays the bills, but we're not really fulfilled necessarily. I've done that before, for sure. And we don't move forward because of that uncertainty, because of that lack of safety, perhaps. So Dan stresses in chapter 7 is that just asking the question, what shall I do different? What shall I do? What should I do next? That in itself, just asking, takes courage. And we have to recognize that and realize that just asking ourselves, what shall I do, takes courage. And we should build on that. So now we shift gears a little bit. We're going to dive into the Spirit's book a little bit and their definition of courage, right? What the Spirit's book tells us is courage is a human virtue, right? As we live our life and we have to make choices, we're in uncomfortable situations. When we have to make moral decisions, when we have to choose left or right or good or bad or not do anything, perhaps just not helping, not assisting, those are all beneficial situations for us. They're moral dilemmas or they're moral choices. And it's through being exposed and having to make those choices that we grow courageously, right? That we strengthen our courage. Making sense? Do we go from who was it in the Yellow Brick Road who didn't have courage? Was it the lion? Who didn't right? The lion, right? Do you go from being the lion without courage to being what he was at the end of that movie like that? It would be nice if it happened in 2 hours, right? Doesn't happen, right? It takes time in this lifetime. In fact, multiple lifetimes, right? This is one of my favorite representations of life after life, reincarnation, right? One spirit, hundreds of lives, thousands of lives, all created, lacking knowledge, right? In the bottom left of this graph, imperfect spirits, lifetime after lifetime, developing our courage, developing our morals. Before you know it, well, not before you know it, many, many lives down the road, evolving to that Christ-like perfection and being pure. If we're on earth, we're in that bottom section, right? That lower third, right? Why? We're still very much tied to material. We're still very much tied to the things that please our eyes or our senses as opposed to what's better morally. Our sense of love is not that pure love, right? As in a pure spirit. We're just more tied to material than to purity. That's not good or bad. It just is, right? That's where we are. What we need to remember is we all start in the bottom left. And lifetime after lifetime, we develop and we grow and we work our way through that. And a big part of that is developing our courage and reminding ourselves that it does develop slowly and that we are going to make mistakes along the way. In this part of that chapter, obviously Christ is pointed out as a great example of courage, right? I don't think any of us would second guess that the way Christ lived and the way he faced his death and that whole journey was extremely courageous. They point out that Judas and Peter are great examples of what a lack of courage can do to people, right? We know Judas sold out the location, right, where to find Christ. We know that Peter denied him 3 times, right? Peter obviously went on and grew, right? Judas, unfortunately, in that particular lifetime, came to an end. But the point is, each one of these difficult moments that we are faced with, whether it's the choice Peter made or Judas made, or the choices we have to make in our own lives. We don't like our boss, our spouse is being mean, our kids aren't grateful, our car broke down, somebody stole our dog, whatever it might be, right? We are forced in these situations, we're given the opportunity actually to make choices. And the better we face these moral dilemmas or these emotional dilemmas, the better we're able to develop our courage. One event at a time, one lifetime at a time. They go on to say that the strength of courage develops when the individual assumes his own responsibilities. In other words, take my life, right, or our life. Throughout this lifetime, we are going to face hardships. We're going to face challenges. Now, you put too many of those together, day after day, week after week, it's kind of easy as to start saying, man, the universe has got something against me, or I have bad luck, or I can't catch a break, right? It's easy to blame others maybe for our shortcomings or for our situation. But what this is oh, sorry guys, what'd I do? There we go. What this reminds us or teaches us is wherever we are, whatever we're facing, right, today stems from choices we made yesterday, a week ago, a lifetime ago, 100 lifetimes ago. We're constantly living the consequences of our previous choices. What do we call that? Cause and effect, right? What I think today impacts tomorrow. And errors, mistakes, things I do to harm others, I'm going to atone for those through the challenges that I create for myself. It's not random. It's not bad luck. It's about as fair as it gets. I'm living the consequences of my previous choices. We're reminded this happens over successive periods of time, right? When I die, when you die, when we die, we don't automatically evolve to the next level, right? Whatever my moral development is, whatever my character is, whatever my level of courage is, it stops, right? It stays there. I come back pretty much where I left off, right? I've rested, I've learned I've studied, I've healed, I understand shortcomings. I make a new plan for the next life, and by the grace of God, I'm back, right? Different body, same spirit, pretty much where I left off, starting to atone and face the challenges that I've created for myself. Easy enough so far? Yeah? I don't know if it's easy. Sounds hard, right? Sometimes I wish I didn't know all this stuff, because then I could just not think about it, not worry about it, right? But it's hard, I think. Essentially, these new challenges, right, in this next life, helps us do what? Develop more courage. And what do they? Wash, rinse, repeat. Right? Just do it again. What Kardec say? Live. Live, relive, and relearn. I forget. I'm messing it up. I should have studied more, guys. I'm sorry. All right. So courage, they go on to tell us, is really an act of moral bravery. What's easier, right? When you see something happening that's not quite right, but it's not really impacting you, right? It's easier just to go around, like the first thing you read. When we see an obstacle, right? Go around, right? But it takes moral bravery to try to fix, to try to help, to try to assist. And this is a virtue that we all have access to. It's a virtue that we can all develop the more we encounter and the more we face emotional events or dilemmas, moral dilemmas. By choosing to assist, by choosing to grow with it, by choosing to not succumb to the easier path. Make sense? Awesome. They also tell us here, right, that courage comprises an element of self-awareness, not just in this moment, right? It's easy to talk about self-awareness in material sense, but when you think about the the self-awareness of the spirit, right? Knowing, understanding that my spirit, right, has lived hundreds of lives, thousands of lives perhaps, and keeping in mind always, being aware that those previous choices have created my current situation. Understanding that my choices today impact not just this immediate life or the people in my immediate circle. It's going to impact my spirit in future lifetimes down the road. And the other thing they point out here is that if we understand moral courage in the sense of what's the saying we teach kids? Hold your breath, count to 10, right? Or blow bubbles, right? That's what the third line means, right? Moral courage calms us down, right? If we have moral courage in the heat of the moment, we can make choices that avoid that animal instinct of fight or flight, perhaps, right? We can make better choices because we've developed our moral courage. It helps us avoid feelings of sorrow. Definitely helps us not plan revenge, right? People hurt us all the time. It's easy sometimes to think, well, I'm going to figure out how to get back at them. It takes moral courage not to seek revenge. And it helps us reduce those hateful feelings and the internal turmoil that comes from disagreements. Again, sounds easy when we talk about it here, but in reality, it's very hard to do. I know that. Now we start talking a little bit from Joanna's chapter in existential conflicts. She talks about courage being therapeutic because it stimulates us to work towards the accomplishment of better choices, or what she calls dignifying tasks. As we strive to evolve, as we strive to grow courage in the face of adversity, it makes us be more morally upright. It makes us be more dignified. Again, if we choose the low road, if we choose the animal instinct, if we choose revenge, it lowers us and it doesn't elevate us. So as we strive to be more courageous, it helps us evolve. Especially when she says that when circumstances are unfavorable, courage should be exercised even in small occurrences and different experiences. We should always try to take the high road. We should always try to take the courageous path. I have 2 hours, right? I feel like I'm just kidding. I do have a lot of content, so I'm going to try not to keep you too long. So she reminds us, though, that on this journey, right, of moral development, of building our courage, right, our biggest enemy, right, or our worst enemy is our pride, our ego. Have I shared the acronym EGO with you? EGO. Have I done that here before? No, I'll do it again, yeah? EGO, edging God out, okay? When our ego is making decisions, there's really no room for God, right? If I'm being prideful, if I'm being ego-driven, I'm not thinking about what God would do or what Jesus taught us when he was on earth, right? I'm thinking about, what does Al want, right? Al wants to be the boss. Al wants to get ahead. Al wants to step on others, maybe. Not intentionally, but he's got to step on others to grow, right? Well, there you go. My worst enemy, my pride, my ego. The more we can suppress that, the more we can fight that with courageousness and moral courageousness, the better it is for us. And the way we do this is what Joanna teaches us is seek humbleness daily, right? Look honestly at your reality. It's easy to put my head on the pillow at night and think about, well, that wasn't my fault. I could have done this, but John should have done that, right? We can create all kinds of realities and rationalize behavior all the time. But what she's reminding us here is, if you put your head on your pillow at night and look at your day honestly, at what happened, you can assess your actions that, hey, I did this really well, right? I can be proud of this, or I did this not so well. I could do this differently tomorrow. And if we can do this regularly, right? Go to bed reliving perhaps things that could be better tomorrow, and then waking up the following day ready to go, not looking back at yesterday, but looking forward to all the things we have to be grateful for, right? We can create that reality on a daily basis, right? Because at the end of the day, our actions, they have consequences, and that's what they're saying here, right? None of us are spared from death. We're all going to die, right? But where do you want to? Where I saw this amazing post on social media the other day. It was unrelated to spiritism or spiritual stuff, but it was about progress, personal development, and the recommendation was write your obituary, right? What do you want your obituary to say, right? And the point here is if I die tonight, right? What's that? Your legacy, right? If I die tonight, the more courageous I can be up until that point, I'm going to continue to grow. If I take the low road, right, and I'm always making poorer choices, I'm just not going to grow as much. I only have so much time in this life, in this day, and the more I seek humbleness, the better I'm going to be as far as living a life with less pain and suffering, and expediting my involvement to being a pure spirit. She reminds us, right, death can strike any time. And the question is asked, are we buried already in pride, right? If so, right, we're going to have a great deal to be sorry for. And we're going to stand, we will be in need of much compassion. Heaven and Hell, which is one of the books of the codification. If you get a chance, I would recommend reading that. There's half of that book is stories from spirits that have gone before us, right? And how they spent centuries, decades, centuries, just very long time in these spiritual comas, if you will, right? They were so wrapped up in pride and so wrapped up in being tied to material, right, as opposed to love, that it just took forever just to get to a point where they could understand where they were and what they needed to maybe start working on. And the more we wrap ourselves in our pride, the more we're going to be in that situation. So better to try to unwrap that pride today as opposed to in that life between lives. We're encouraged, right, that when we suffer injustice, how many of you have never been hurt by anybody? Your life has been total bliss. Tim, I know, Tim, I know. He just has a bad memory. All of us, right, we've all suffered at the hands of other people to some extent, right? Multiple times in some ways, right? Remember Christ, right? He taught us to turn the other cheek, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Treat your neighbor, right, like yourself. That's what this reminds. This is that again, right? Be indulgent towards their faults. Nobody's perfect, right? Everybody's got their issues. We're not without our faults. When we treat others like this, right? When we're indulgent of their faults, when we pray for our enemies, and Christ didn't tell us you gotta hug your enemy, invite him to dinner, and trust him with your kids. He just said love your enemy, right? Pray for them, wish them well, pray for them to get better, right? Show them, be indulgent towards them, and this shows love and humbleness. How many of you saw that post the other day on social media of Pluto? Remember that one? I'll share it with you. Pluto, White, at some point, when I was a kid, it was the 9th planet, right? Then not too long ago, 9-10 years ago, it said, oh no, Pluto's not a planet. And the post is a picture of Pluto. It says, Pluto doesn't care what everybody says. Be like Pluto, right? And that's what they're telling us here. If people say bad stuff about you, accept it. It doesn't define you, right? You're not whatever they're saying. You know that, right? But it's hard when people are throwing stones at you. It hurts, right? But they're telling us, look, just accept it as another trial. Thank people for being mean to you. I'm trying to tell my teenage daughters that. Be thankful. They're gonna help you grow. It's a different story when you're 14, I think. But the point is, accept it and move on. It's another trial. How many of you ever heard of a guy named Ram Dass? He's a Middle East. Well, he's American. He's a Harvard guy that turned super spiritual. And some of his, I like reading some of his stuff, watching some of his stuff. He's no longer with us. He's passed on. But at some point in his life, 10, 12 years ago, he had a stroke, a debilitating stroke, right, where he couldn't talk. This guy made his life was speaking and teaching and sharing with others. He couldn't talk anymore, really. He could, but it was really hard to understand him. So in an interview I saw with him, he's talking about his stroke. And you know what the guy said? I thank God every day for my stroke. My stroke made me go within, right? And I accept it with grace. And that's the point with this, right? No matter how many of you would be happy and thankful if you had a stroke? I cut myself shaving and I get mad at the world, right? Because I'm bleeding, right? My point is, no matter what the world throws at us, whatever we face from our consequences of our choices, if it's negative, accept it as another trial with grace and optimism, knowing that you can work through it. Sounds easy, right? It's hard, man. What's that? It takes courage. Exactly. All right. What they say does not matter, right? If your conduct is clean, right? If you don't react to their comments, if you don't retaliate, we'll be rewarded, right? With less suffering, with less turmoil, with less stress. The more we can withstand the offenses, the better we suffer and the more humble we are. And in God, right, there's strength. Realizing that we put ourselves in these situations, realizing that whatever we're facing are the consequences of our previous choices. The stronger we are, the stronger we face it, the more humbly we face it. What are we developing? Courage, right? That's how you do it. All right. Now getting back to the Spirit's book in this chapter on pride and ego, the question is asked, right? Does Christ have to come again to teach us these things? If he did come again, would we reject him? Would we crucify him again? Right? It's thousands of years, 2,000 and so many years, right? If he came again, what would happen? Here's the thing. He doesn't have to come again, right? But he left us his doctrine, right? He gave us the examples of all the different virtues. I disregard several of them every day, I'm sure. Not on purpose always, right? I always try to do better, right? But I still disregard them. And in the Spirit's book, they're comparing current day us, not following his example, as the idol maker during the idol making during Moses' time, and basically telling us, look, we all make gods according to our desires, right? Our senses, our ego, our pride, our vice, those are our golden calves and our downfall, right? In our ego and pride. We worship our own version of the golden calf today, just like they did in Moses' time. We're reminded in chapter, I think it's 9, I forget now, the gospel, right? It reminds us to wake up. Listen to the voices of the good spirits around you. Let their words echo in your hearts. Be generous, be loving, be courageous. One of the best ways to do this, right, is to calm ourselves every day. There's a great reminder that I try to think of. We all have the same amount of time in a day, right? Same number of minutes, same number of seconds. 1 hour is about 4% of our day. How many 4% of my day do I waste or do things that are more material as opposed to spiritual? If we could just give 4% of our day to connecting with God, to meditation, to prayer, to study. If we can try to do, even if it's just 2% of our day consistently, reading 3 pages, 4 pages of a book like this, or the gospel every morning before we go to bed, maybe at lunchtime. Just try to devote a little bit of time to all of this each day. And before you know it, we are being courageous. We are growing more loving. We are being more generous because we're devoting time to we're putting good things in. And that's what they stress here, right? Little by little, as we do those things, we can tear down those altars that we've erected in our hearts to ego and pride. If we can try to live by the teachings of Christ on a regular basis, and if we can stop questioning the goodness of God and just trusting in it, the weight will be lifted and we will be more courageous and better prepared to face the day. And then finally in that chapter, it talks about make your hearts gentle and mild, and you will find the path filled with courage, goodness, compassion, and love. And now they give some advice. This is going back to Joanna. I love this advice. Here's what she tells us. Stop complaining, all right, about your afflictions. You heap them on yourself, right? You have ignored the divine ethic of Christ. So don't be surprised when the cup of wrongdoing overflows on all sides. There's more to that page. It's the higher you, more hoity-toity or more lofty you are, the steeper the fall. The point here is is wherever we're facing, we've created, we've presented it to ourselves. And we have the ability to overcome. We just have to choose to be what? Courageous, right, Peter? All right. Again, she stresses the pride is the root of all of our problems. And if we can devote ourselves to overcoming it, that's awesome. Otherwise, we just perpetuate its harmful effects. She teaches us that there's only one way to do this. Take Christ's law as your one rule of conduct, and stop chasing or emphasizing things that are more pleasing to our eyes and our senses as opposed to our soul. The things I taste, the things I smell, the things I see, the things I touch, right? Things that give me pleasure physically or materially. Do they go with me when I die? No. They're whatever, right? My bank account, my car, my whatever, right? It doesn't come with me. What goes with me? What stays with my spirit? My actions, my morals, my intellect, and the debt owed for the things I didn't do right. Right? The choices I didn't make, the bad choices I made. All that stays with me. And there's no free lunch, right? At some point I gotta pay the bill. And that's a hard pill to swallow for me. Because like I said, I mess up every day. But each day I wake up optimistic. With or without courage. With or without, yeah, right, exactly. So we're reminded, cherish the godly person, not the celebrity with the twisted life, right? How much time do we spend reading about their lives, right? And inflated egos, all those things, right? Make it easy to identify ourselves with those people, right? We all have those we can find those commonalities. But they remind us, do not let material things overshadow your good sense and reason, or to always scramble to get ahead of your brother. Instead of trying to get ahead of your brother, give them a hand and lift them up. Pull them with you. Help push them forward, right? Is what they're teaching us. Let's spend less time trying to get ahead and more time helping others come along with us. For the greatest among you is the humblest of the humble. The most loved in the afterlife is he who has loved his or her fellow humans the most. And it's really hard, I think, for us, for me especially, at times, to love everybody in that sense, right? I don't think I hate anybody, and I don't think I try to hurt anybody, but it's hard for me to love in that pure sense with some of the atrocities that occur. But this is what they're telling us, right? Love your fellow humans. Like when Osama bin Laden was assassinated, right? Did we pray for him? How about Hitler? Did we pray for Hitler's soul? How about the worst of the worst people that commit crimes on children? Do we pray for them? I'm sorry. I don't always do that. I have a hard time doing that. You hurt my kids, and I don't know what I might do, right? Because I'm still at that point, right? But what they're telling us here is that those people deserve our prayer, deserve our love, our compassion. And over time, I think we'll get there. Right now, I'm not there 100%. I'm not saying you should be, but I'm just saying that what they're teaching us here is the more humble we can be, the more loving we can be towards every one of God's creations, the more humble we are, and the greater we are in the afterlife, the more advanced or the more evolved we are. And we're reminded here in this slide that the powerful on earth, right, who abuse their authority, will find themselves reduced to a position of obedience to their own servants. So if we're responsible for others, if we're managers or owners of business, or we pay people, or we're responsible for people, our actions towards them are we have to be very conscious of that as well, because we are responsible for that. And then we'll finish up with this from the gospel. two siblings, right? Humbleness of heart, and love. They go hand in hand. If you think about Christ and his life, he was humble and he loved all, and he prayed for the people that were murdering him. Right? Whether you believe in Christ from a religious standpoint, or you call yourself a Christian, or you're an atheist or an agnostic or any other faith, if you didn't know anything about Christ other than the way he lived his life, could you deny that the world would be a better place if we all tried to live like him? And that's the point, right? Just the way Christ lived and the gospel that he left us, the stories about his choices and his words and his thoughts, and the way he loved others and forgave others. If we can just a little thimble of that every day, a little bit, just try a little bit more of that every day, and grow in our humbleness of heart and our love for others. Those are the best means for attaining the grace from God and developing courage and facing each day better than we did the day before. So I will stop talking. Thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate the opportunity to present what I learned. Thank you so much.